I'm joined today by Marge Baker, who's the Executive Vice President of People for the American Way. Marge, we've been talking about Republican Party policy, and one area of Republican Party policy that's important to talk about is gender related policy. And what I want to start with is sort of at the top level. Do you believe that Republican Party policy and ideals and talking points perpetuate misogyny when it comes to women?
I think there's a real anti-woman theme to the Republicans' language, policies, agenda that it is really important for us to recognize. And it's all aspects of issues that are really important to women, and it's about how they talk about women. And it's really disturbing. It's really disturbing. It's disrespectful and it's disturbing.
So I think the topic that sort of comes first to people's minds when they hear this is issues of reproductive rights. So I would love to start there with you. Can you give us some specific examples of the language and trigger words that Republicans use when discussing reproductive rights that are so hostile to women?
Sure. Well, here's a good example. Ted Cruz recently got the endorsement of somebody named Troy Newman, who we know from our Right Wing Watch reporting is an ardent anti-choice activist who actually believes that abortion providers should be killed.
Right.
And Ted Cruz was celebrating his endorsement by Troy Newman, who thinks abortion providers should be killed. But it's not just Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio thinks that abortion, any abortion whatsoever, should be illegal. There should be no ability to have any abortion, even though the Constitution provides that right. And Jeb Bush celebrates himself as the most anti-choice governor there's ever been. So it's like a talking point they use to stir up their base that they're proud of. And they do it all in the name of suggesting that they are, they're protecting women from themselves. They're trying to insert their judgment as government officials or candidates in place of women and issues that are of importance to women, and it should be between a woman and her doctor and her family.
I think that there's sometimes a trap that progressives fall into on this issue, and I'd be really curious to get your thoughts on it. When discussions come up about funding Planned Parenthood, for example, which has been a controversial issue, which I don't believe should be one within the Republican primary and politics generally over the last several years, we often hear progressives say, hey, hold on a second, only 3% of what Planned Parenthood does is abortion-related services, and federal funds don't go to that. And while that's absolutely true, I feel like that is almost taking a defensive stand because, as you said, we're talking here about a legal medical procedure that is not only legal, but it is also common. Is it sort of a loss for progressives when they have to take that defensive point of view?
I don't think it's a loss, but I think it should be a both and. In other words, I think it's important for anybody who's voting on or evaluating people on their votes on defunding Planned Parenthood to understand that organization provides a wealth of health services, mostly to lower income women who would not be able to get those health services if Planned Parenthood were to close its offices. So I think it is important to understand that. And it's also important to understand that the abortion services that Planned Parenthood does provide are totally legal, totally constitutional, within their constitutional right to provide and within women's constitutional rights to have. And so I think it's a both end. I think I understand the importance of understanding the huge expanse of services Planned Parenthood provides. And it's also really, really important to emphasize that the abortion services that Planned Parenthood does provide are totally constitutional within a woman's right to have.
So if we move beyond just issues of choice and reproductive rights, talk to our audience about some of the other ways that we should be aware of how language from Republican candidates is hostile to women.
Yeah, again, it's language and their policies. Donald Trump calls women pigs and fat slobs or whatever. I mean, it's just like the language he uses is just atrocious. But again, it's not just Trump. Jeb Bush, in his book, I think it was called Profiles in Character, actually said that unwed mothers should be publicly shamed
Hmm.
for their motherhood, right? And when he was governor, he refused to veto a law that would have required a single mom who didn't know the identity of her child's father to publish a list of her sexual partners in the newspaper before she could put that child up for adoption.
Right.
So, it's so this attack on women, this disrespect for women, that treating them as um, uh, beneath property. It's just offensive, and it's pervasive. And we hear language that Donald Trump uses, but they're all the same in terms of the actual policies that are just draconian. Another issue where they're just absolutely in the wrong place is on equal pay. I mean, women today earn 79% of the dollar to what men earn, and Marco Rubio calls that the Paycheck Fairness Act, which is intended to close that gap, welfare for trial lawyers, not something intended to close a gender gap. Jeb Bush didn't even know what the Paycheck Fairness Act was, and Donald Trump suggested that the reason women are paid less than men is because they don't do as good a job. I mean, it's just, again, the way that the Republicans, by voice, by their actions, by the policies they support, continue to really devalue women is offensive. And then when they do it in the context of protecting women, the so-called targeted restrictions on abortion providers legislation, one of which, the Texas law, is being considered by the Supreme Court, that imposes all sorts of unnecessary requirements on abortion providers in terms of access to admitting privileges at hospitals and needing to be set up as a surgical facility, even though the method for abortion is largely taking a pill. These are all done in the name of protecting women, but it's not about protecting women. It's about eliminating women's constitutional ability to seek and pay for an abortion.
And Marge, what's your sense of how the Republican candidates, other than Carly Fiorina, are sort of relating to or addressing or speaking to the lone female Republican candidate, Carly Fiorina? Has there been anything interesting you've observed there?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Carly is herself so bad on these issues that,
Yeah.
I mean, she's almost anti-women herself. So I guess I don't necessarily, I'm not sure if I see her treated differently. I think, Trump may have had, taken her on at some point on issues around her appearance, which he wouldn't have done to a man. So I think that's something to notice. And I didn't see too many people standing up for her. But Carly herself has been she's not good on these issues. And so, her policies are as draconian as the next.
And how about with regard to Hillary Clinton? Do you see it's hard to sort of suss out how much of the rhetoric from Republicans against Hillary Clinton is based on her being the sort of de facto frontrunner on the Democratic side versus how much it's related to her being a female candidate. But is there anything there to observe in terms of the attacks on Hillary?
It's interesting. I haven't really observed anything yet, but I think it'll come. I mean, I fully expect it to come. I think you're right that probably she's being taken on more right now as the front runner, but I totally expect that to come, and I think that's really dangerous waters for them. I think it's really dangerous waters for them. It will be interesting to see how they try to play that, and I think Hillary, who's obviously a champion on these issues, will be no match for them.
Do you think within the Democratic primary, which now, technically still a three-way race with Martin O'Malley, but it has effectively become a two-way race with Bernie Sanders, but at any point during the Democratic primary, in the unfortunately very limited and obscurely scheduled debates that we've had, what have you seen in terms of the dynamic within the Democrats on issues related to gender and women's rights?
I think I think that debate has been pretty good. I mean, I think the candidates are great on the issue. I think the debate has been respectful. I don't feel gender dynamics coming up in the policy debates that exist between Sanders and Clinton. So I actually think, to a certain extent, they're modeling the way a campaign should be run, right? It should be not based on gender. It should be based on the stature of the person and their ideas, and have a healthy debate on the issues. And I think, I would like to see more debate, but I think what we're seeing has been pretty healthy.
We've been speaking with Marge Baker, Executive Vice President of People for the American Way. Marge, thanks so much for talking to us today, and I know you'll be continuing to follow the election as we will and paying attention to these issues. Really important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.